I'm Jade, that's Jill, this is Plus Points, and what's on the slate this week?
Well, there are 4 of them. They begin the New Testament, and one of these things isn't quite like the others.
These are the Gospels. The 4 Gospels, strictly speaking anonymous, but generally called Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, weren't written until a few decades after Jesus. After all, when you're a small sect being persecuted and expecting the end of the world anytime soon, writing stuff down really isn't your highest priority, right?
But between approximately 50 and 110 CE, write stuff down these 4 did. Actually, there were a lot of people writing Gospels in this period, but these are the ones that made it to print, so to speak.
A reader of the Gospels will notice, as my colleague has already pointed out, that one of these things, not quite like the others.
Matthew, Mark and Luke are known as the synoptics, and there is a huge amount of narrative agreement between them, which means there's substantial overlap between both what they say and the exact phrasings they use to say it.
Greek is not a language that requires very strict word ordering, and the synoptics have a lot of parts which are exactly the same. John does what he wants. Yes, sweetie, you're a very special snowflake. We'll get back to you.
Because of this narrative agreement, it's not a huge stretch to assume that the synoptics, at least, had a common root, that there was a tradition already of stories about Jesus and sayings of Jesus, pericopes, and that these were used, along with whatever personal supplementation the writer could provide, to write the Gospel of Mark.
And then Luke and Matthew used Mark as their primary source when writing their accounts, but didn't get to read each other's. John, well, like we said, he does what he wants, because his focus is a bit different.
Each Gospel is unique and tells the story of Jesus to a particular place, in a particular context, at a particular time. Matthew's concern is a specifically Jewish one. He wants you to know that Jesus is the prophesied Messiah, so he uses the word king, and he uses the words son of David, and he quotes Old Testament prophecies the most, and he repeatedly uses words which mean fulfilled.
Mark is the shortest, written to the Romans, has parallels between Jesus and Isaiah's suffering servant, and emphasises the humanity of Jesus and his compassion, i.e. miracle workings and healings.
Luke, writing to the Greeks, is most concerned with Jesus as a friend of the lost and the outcast. And he's very concerned with the universal nature of salvation. So he will balance a story of men with a story about women, and he will balance a story about Jews with a story about Gentiles.
John, and we can probably take him at his word here, writes, so that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah of God. He writes specifically to emphasise the deity of Christ. That is his goddishness.
Goddishness?
You knew what I meant.
Sure I did. So we have these 4 church-approved...
that took a few centuries.
True, accounts of the life of Jesus, and it's best to think of them as complementary rather than competing.
As always, our primary exegesis is what is the writer trying to say, not how does this fit with what everybody else is trying to say. The Gospels, while partially biographical, are not biographies, nor are they chronological, nor do they contain everything. This is our key point. The Gospels are material about Jesus, selected, arranged and adapted by the writers to present to their specific contexts. Blessed are the poor, or blessed are the poor in spirit? Well, both. Both are true. Both are important. Both are part of Jesus' mission. So what about interpreting them then?
Well, at this juncture, I always point out it had a meaning to the author and the readers at the time, and it doesn't necessarily have the same meaning to people in a modern context.
Though it might do.
True. Love God and love your neighbour, for example, transcends time and distance, and was hardly a new saying even in Jesus' day. But other things may need a little more interpretation. With that being said, Jesus is not trying to be obtuse. Well, okay, maybe once or twice, but with parables, not trying to be obtuse, I swear.
Parable is probably an inexact term. Jesus' sayings are a mixture of similes. The kingdom of heaven is like a farmer, a mustard seed, a king, a net, a merchant, yeast, a lot of things.
Metaphors like you are the salt of the earth.
Epigrams, pithy sayings like, do unto others as you would have them do unto you.
And true parables, which are stories with a beginning, a middle, an end, and something resembling a plot, like the Good Samaritan.
There's hyperbole, as in gouge out your eye, or indeed Jesus being sarcastic.
Jesus is kind of sarcastic sometimes, but regardless, the stories and sayings in the Gospels have meanings and can be understood. And while each Gospel emphasizes different things, they all want to point you in the same direction, towards Jesus of Nazareth.
And have you heard what they've been saying about him? Let me give you a breakdown. Gotta go.
And they're also valuable insights into the historical Jesus, the beliefs of the early church, and the audiences to which they were written.
So if you were reading them, where would you start?
Well, I think, sorry, John, but Luke's my favourite, so I'd definitely start with him. And for the second of Luke's great notable works, you should come back next time for the Acts of the Apostles.